Welcome to Taking Stock. I'm Amanda Lang. Coming up on the show, did Canada just abandon its best shot at meeting its climate change goals? And company profit probably isn't causing inflation, but you'd never know it from the headlines. Plus, transparency in pay may help right some historic wrongs. That's all ahead. First, for the week that was in business, it's time for the briefs. The cost of housing continues to soar in Canada. Average rent for a one-bedroom apartment of all types hit a record $2,149 in September. That's an increase of 11% from a year ago, according to rentals.ca. The biggest increase was in purpose-built apartment buildings, where the rents rose an average of 14.6%, compared to townhouse or condo apartments, which saw increases closer to 8.5%. The federal government will clear the way for construction of 2,800 housing units on 6 federal properties. The real estate is controlled by Canada Lands Co., and the new housing will include at least 20% of units that are deemed affordable. The announcement of new housing helps keep the federal government on track for its target to add 29,200 housing units by 2029. A new code of conduct being proposed for Canada's grocers is being met with resistance from the biggest. Loblaws says, as written, the draft code could push food prices higher to the tune of $1 billion. That number and the premise that the code will hurt consumers is being rejected by other members of the sector who are endorsing the code. Some of the proposed rules are aimed at shifting the power between suppliers and grocers. Once high-flying shared office firm WeWork is filing for court protection from creditors, seeking to exit 69 leases for office space as part of its bankruptcy filing, 5 of them in Canada. WeWork is trying to reduce its debt and cash outlays amid the sharp downturn in office use post-pandemic. A motion that would have forced the feds to extend a carbon tax exemption to all home heating failed in the House of Commons this week, but it highlights the central weakness with the government's decision to exempt only home heating oil from its carbon tax, and may not be the last form of pressure to extend that exemption. Canada is not on track to meet its 2030 emissions reductions targets. An audit by the Commissioner of the Environment notes that emissions in Canada have not seen sustainable decline since 2005, and that key policies aimed at reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions have been delayed. The report notes that the delays in policy increase the likelihood of Canada missing that 2030 target altogether. And those are your business briefs. The audit this week of Canada's weak path to meeting its greenhouse gas emission targets comes on the heels of the weakening of the carbon tax, which was seen as a key part of the federal government's reduction plan. Given that we're tracking to miss those 2030 goals, how much further do we need to go now? Jerry DeMarco is Canada's Environment Commissioner. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Amanda.
So I must say the audit did not inspire confidence. Would you say, in summary, that we are not going to meet those 2030 emission reduction targets?
We won't meet it with the plan as it is, but there's still time to course correct. We don't need to give up yet.
And one of the things that, of course, the report notes is that some of the key policies that would get us there aren't in place or aren't being fully enforced. What is that sort of a roadmap to helping solve this problem, put the policies in place, and that might get us there?
Yeah, they certainly need to add measures because even by Environment Canada's own estimation, the measures in the plan don't add up to 40 to 45%. So they've got to bridge that gap, and they've also have to correct quite a few deficiencies in their own 34%.
One of the things I think really jumped out at me, I think it'll jump out at others, is the idea that we haven't seen meaningful reductions in our emissions since 2005. In other words, there was a period of declines, but one thing and another, it just hasn't been sustained. So what do you make of that? What does that say about Canada's commitment to getting to the goals?
Yeah, whether you look back to 1990 or 2005, Canada is last amongst the G7 nations in terms of getting a handle on greenhouse gas emissions. So we definitely need to up our game to bend the curve in the right direction.
And of course, another piece of this that, as the Office of the Auditor, you would be looking at is how well we do in measuring progress. It doesn't sound like we have good systems in place to say to measure in ways that are very quantifiable. What does that speak to? How do we need to solve that problem in your view?
Yeah, quite a few measures in the plan don't have quantified targets associated with them. Many are missing timelines and milestones. So there's a lot of measures in there that are giving rise to question marks for the auditors in our office. So they need to fill those gaps as well in terms of all the details of the measures, so we know whether they do add up or not.
And I should ask you, I know that your office in general does not speak to politics or policy directives, but one big change that's happened, and I suspect it happened after you'd gathered the material for this analysis, was that what I would say is a weakening of the carbon tax, the exemption on home heating oil, the idea that other types of home heating will now feel pressure to be exempted. Would that change the analysis in this report at all if that had been considered?
Well, the government estimates the carbon levy to account for about a third of what they hope to achieve between now and 2030. So it's a big ticket item, and it needs to be effective and widely applied in order to contribute that one third. But as you indicated, this new announcement came after our audit, so we have not seen any analysis of its impact on the numbers, its impact in terms of equitable distribution of the burden with Canadians, and we haven't seen an analysis of the impact it will have on market confidence in terms of investment in new technology and R&D if there's a loss of confidence in the certainty around the carbon price. So those are the types of questions we would have, and perhaps we'll look at that in next year's report.
Safe to say things didn't get better with that change.
If they have found that it will diminish the effectiveness of the price, then they're going to have to find some other measures somewhere else to compensate.
Really great to have you for this. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amanda.
Jerry DeMarco is Canada's Environment Commissioner. Coming up, fingers continue to be pointed at corporations raising prices and fueling inflation. But is there any evidence that that's what's going on? Stay with us.